Hello everyone, welcome to my last teaching memo. The course ends on Thursday, August 25th. I will be closing my grade book the following Friday, September 2nd. If you are planning to take an incomplete, and I think I may have one person that's doing that, remember you must have completed at least 75% of the requirements, and you also need to sign a contract as to what you need to finish to complete it and dates. So please contact me by email or phone if this is a course of action you are contemplating. Otherwise, I will just put in 50s for things you haven't finished. I have closed the last discussion board and thought that there was some very good discussion about the differences between a Mr. Jones, that was Marissa, and Miss W, that was Emily. This formative assessment / grading discussion is a very crucial one to all current and prospective teachers. For your information, I have placed a handout in session 11, course materials entitled 25 Quick Formative Assessments for the Differentiated Classroom. I know at least one person, Yale, found it and thanked me for it because there's a lot of good information on there. And if you're looking for ideas to do formative assessment, there's plenty of them in that document. You need to check your grades, make sure all of your assignments have been handed in. As I mentioned last week, some of you still haven't completed the SPED presentation, SPED video assessments. I believe they were in session 2. So make sure you check your grades. You can go into My Grades on the left-hand menu. I'm not sure if that's how all of you are checking your grades, but if you go into over here where it says My Grades, if I click on that, it'll just say that there are no grades for me, but I put that link there so you can easily check your grades and see what you owe and what you don't owe. All right. Let's talk a little bit about session 11. Many of you mentioned Marissa, as I knew you would, because there are many teachers like Mr. Jones in the profession, even at Turo, I understand, as several of you have mentioned. It always amazes me that professors who are training teaching candidates about assessment, who are training teachers, do not model good assessment practice and have you go deeper than just comment. I'm sorry. I use this piece to activate your conversation about assessment for learning practice and have you go deeper. Rather than just have you comment how bad he was. Oh yeah, he's bad, I've had teachers like that. I wanted you also to say, what could he have done? And in contrast, I provided you with the Emily video and Miss W so you could compare and say, okay, these are some things Mr. Jones could have done. Or you could have even compared it to some of the things I did, and some of you did do that. Yale and I got into a conversation about Miss W and the way, after time, she allowed her students to give each other feedback. This is one way, when you talk about writing and giving feedback to writing, how time-consuming it is, especially if you're teaching in middle or high school and you have more than one group of students. So if you're giving feedback to 100 to 150 students, it becomes very time sensitive to have to do it for all of those people. So it behooves you to be able to train your students to do peer evaluation and to have peer feedback. I shared an article in GoLab, Meeks and Miller, pretty recent article, it was just a couple weeks ago, about how to scaffold this kind of peer evaluation. Yale felt her first graders, with her first graders, she might start with correcting writing mistakes like spelling and grammar, and that was one of the first parts of this article, one of the first suggestions they made to begin to scaffold your students into doing peer feedback, peer evaluations. I challenged her to go even further, so we'll see how that works. Good luck to you and Yale and anyone else who wants to do that. One thread, the conversation turned to the Common Core State Standards and how many parents feel so negative about them. I feel so strongly that most of them are just feeding off social media, and they are operating without a clear understanding of what they actually entail. Melissa mentioned that she is going to try hard next school year to improve on her communication of the standards to her parents. We also need to talk about them with our students as a connection to all of our learning targets. Jacqueline shared a sample of math units that preface the standards in all of the handouts, which she downloaded from a Teachers Pay Teachers site called Thrifty in Grade 3. And I clicked onto it, and you can see it right here. And for $24, she has a whole year's worth of math lessons. I thought that was cheap, and she does too, naturally. But $24 for a whole year's worth of assignments that are prefaced by the Common Core standards. She even allows you to download a sample. Of course, you have to register before they'll let you download those. So check that out. I think that Teachers Pay Teachers is a great site. And why shouldn't you get paid for your work that you have painstakingly prepared? So great site, things that you should check into. All right. And thanks, Jacqueline, for sharing that. Jennifer, Christina, and Courtney referred to what I consider a very powerful formula. And this is, if you're going to take away anything, take away this formula: confidence plus effective effort equals success, and take away those 3 steps in formative assessment. Where am I going? Where am I now? And how can I close the gap? That is the key to formative assessment, that students know where they're going. In other words, you give them your goals in student-friendly language and even help them chart them. So here I am, and this is where I need to be. So how can I close that gap? Great comment, great formulas, great little phrases to remember. Our goal is to provide exemplars, rubrics, and usable feedback to create the confidence that students need. How often do our students try to do work at home without the effective strategies to perform the work? So what good does it do to say, oh, your student just isn't working hard enough, Mrs. Jones? No, that's usually not the case. They usually go home and saying, I have no clue what I'm doing. So they come back to school unsuccessful, and we tell the parents you need to work harder, when we all know the response to that is no, they need to work smarter. So keep that in mind as you progress through your teaching career. Grading is always one of my favorite topics, and the giving of zeros that seem to evoke an evil smile on the faces of many veteran teachers, or even fairly young ones. And it's what I call ego-based grading, where you say, yeah, you deserve a 0, you little so-and-so. So also this acceptance of late work. And we are not teaching students to be lazy. We're teaching students that you're going to do this until you get it right, which is what you do in the real world. I like the references many of you made to Rick Wormelli's articles and the videos, several of which I placed in session 12. So if you haven't gotten to that point, please check that out. There are no extra assignments for this week. It's just doing things that you've been building up to for the semester, the analytic summary and the vocabulary in your own words. Also, both Wormelli and Reeves, in his video about toxic grading practices, argued against averaging students' various attempts and do-overs, comparing it to a long-distance runner who didn't get credit for his best time, but it's not, they averaged all his times from the beginning of the year or the beginning of his career. Can you imagine that? And so I just started doing this semester. I started weighting, and rather than averaging everything, I started weighting it. So the assignments you did in the beginning of the semester had much less weight than the ones that you did later in the semester. So that's a practice I would recommend for everybody. If you're doing assignments the same assignments that build up to at the end of the unit, or the end of, like if you're doing a writing assignment, a lot of writing assignments of a particular type, then the first ones you do have less weight than the ones you do at the end. So I think that's a very important practice. Oftentimes we don't see the power of allowing students to do work over, but as Melissa mentioned, and this made me feel good, that she appreciated my practice of allowing do-overs. Just think how you feel when you know an assessment is not do or die, and that if you miss something or make a mistake, you can go back and fix it, just like you would in a real job, in the real world, And a lot of people argue that about these grading practices. Well, that's not what they do in the real world. You don't get to do it over. Well, yes, you do. If you do something and it's not correct, your boss is going to send it back to you and say, hey, do this over until you get it right. So winding up, make sure you've handed in all your assignments, as I've said, by checking my grades link. Blackboard, it's on the left-hand side of the menu. In session 12 assignments, you can upload your vocabulary in your own words. I had one. I think it was Angela that wrote to me and said that those are handouts. Said that the vocabulary in your own words template in the assignments for session 12 was not the same one that I did in the beginning, and she was right. It wasn't. So I have the right one there now. But you should have been filling that out all semester, right? There's a terse self-test. It's the same one you did in the beginning. Don't worry about the grade that you get on it. It's just to use as comparison. It was Popham's test. He had it in his textbook. I think it was in chapter 1, which I didn't have you read. But I will place them side by side in your grades so you can see the difference. This is the 3-part analytic summary. This is the rubric for it. Remember, you have to use APA format. Many of you have already handed it in. But the only part of APA format I want you to use is the citation part. You also should double space too. But if you don't, I'm not gonna take points off. But I will take points off if you're not using the appropriate references. In almost every case, I have given you the proper form of reference, even for the EdTPA, which is not EdTPA special ed assessment. It's scale. It's whatever scale stands for. That's the initial, scale 2016 should be your citation, and then you should spell out what scale means in your reference. So. There's a video, of course. I mentioned that last week. I also had it in last session's course materials or assignments. So you have plenty, and there's rubrics. And one of the rubrics in course materials, you were unable to open. It was the first exemplar 1 you weren't able to open, but now all of them are you can open them. And there's just some other resources here that you may want to look at and download for your own benefit. It's all good stuff about rubrics. The exemplars are things you should look at. So that should be it. Finally, there's an evaluative form available in discussion boards where you can comment on the course, both positive and negative. I am always upgrading my course based on student feedback. Many prospective students drop my course once they see the session 1 assignment. So I really need to know if you feel that that first week and I usually spread it out over 2 weeks, that there's too much work. Let me know if you think that it's true. I'm open to supportive feedback. There's always a link to There's also a link to the Turo course evaluation in session 10. I usually get a ton of emails saying this is the link to the course evaluation. I didn't get them during the summer, so I'm hoping that link works that I have in session 10. So if it isn't, I'm hoping that they sent all of you emails to a link to the course evaluation. So that's it. I wish you all well in your teaching careers. It's my hope that Dr. Tom will be in the back of your head whenever you are pondering how to improve your teaching. What would Dr. Tom think? So good luck to all of you.